And my grandfather was always saying, "Why are you reading all these Romana? You should read the Bible." So sometimes he would just give me the Bible to read it, and I would just read the stories of Joshua and Samuel. Those are the ones I like the best, right? I would read that stuff, and I remember my grandfather would say sometimes, "Why are you reading that difficult thing? Why don't you read this letters or gospels?" Like, I'm thinking, what? To me, it was easy to read the stories. Absolutely not Apostle Paul. That's how it started. I was hired as an angel professor, and I think the first time when I went, they kind of did like a commission in the chapel, and they gave me some angel wings to wear. It's kind of interesting. If you hear a sermon, you might agree or you might disagree. If you read something, you might agree or disagree, but when you sing it, you're almost committing yourself to what you sing. If you say, "I have decided to follow Jesus," and you sing it, it's different than just from reading a confession or reading a passage from the Bible. I met my wife on a charity cup trip with you guys in 2004. I ended up, marrying her in 2005. If you wait long enough and if you study the things well enough, you will see that they're not going to disprove the Bible. They're going to support the Bible. Take the book of Psalms, pray it, sing it, memorize it. And I think if you do that, you will know more about God. It will make you love God more, and it would also, send you into missions, because the book of Psalms, it's also a missional book. I'm talking to you too, Dan.
That's right. That's right. I'll never look at the Psalms the same. Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Bora. I am the host of this podcast called Make Your Life Count, produced by Charity Cup. As you know, Make Your Life Count is the motto for Charity Cup. And what we believe is that in order to make your life count, you should invest in things that are eternal, which is God and people. And by people, I mean people's souls. So all the stories we feature on this channel has to do with people that are investing in your life in those things, in eternal things. Today's guest has lived this out as well, and in a different way than maybe some of our other guests. He's a good friend of mine, a good friend of the ministry, has been sort of on and off involved with Charity Cup throughout the years. I know him as an awesome guy, loves the Lord. And more than that, he's also a very smart individual who currently serves as a professor of Old Testament at Southwestern Dallas Theological Seminary. Did I say that right, Chris?
Yeah, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Okay. Before that, prior to that, he also served in Korea for many years as a professor there. I'll let him tell us a little bit more of that. But more than that, he's also been involved on and off with Charity Cup, serving on many mission trips, and sort of as an advisor as well, and also as a dear friend. And so I want to help, without any further ado, welcome Cristian Rata to the podcast. Chris, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. Nice to see you, Dan.
Same here. Good to see you. So, Chris, maybe if you can kind of tell us kind of where things are at right now and what's your status. I know you have a beautiful family. Maybe a little bit about that, and then I want to go back a little bit into the past and come back from there.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So yeah, I'm married, as Dan mentioned. I'm married to Viorica, and we have 4 children. We live in Texas, and yeah, I'm teaching Old Testament at Southwestern. But I also work with Training Leaders International. I still work with them, and so I teach about 2-3 times a year, either in Asia or Africa or South America. This year, however, my focus has been in Asia. So I work both at Southwestern, but I'm very concerned about the work with Training Leaders International, where we train young pastors, young ministers around the world. Again, this year the focus has been mostly on South Asia.
Awesome. So I know that you're probably very familiar with South Asia because you lived there, right, for quite a long time.
Yeah, so I lived in Korea, so more like on the eastern side. Yeah, but yeah, and I did have students from all over Asia. Like we had students from China, from Myanmar, from Japan, and India and a few other places. And I did visit a few of those countries. So yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with that. Not as much as I'd like to, but yes.
So, as you mentioned, obviously, to get to this point of teaching hundreds of students, I assume, young people, maybe some older, on different continents, and I know personally you're very passionate about that. I want to understand, and we want the audience to understand, where does that come from? How did you arrive to have that type of passion, and sort of invested your time and resources to kind of do this on a full-time basis? So to help us understand that, I want to maybe dive back a little bit and sort of from the very beginning of maybe how you came to know the Lord. How did this passion instill in you? So if you can kind of help us understand that. So I know you started out in Romania. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your family and how you grew up. And
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. So yeah, I was born in Romania, Reșița. And yeah, I grew up in a very, very solid church, which, later split intentionally. And, but there was a very strong church with strong biblical preaching and teaching. And, my parents, my grandparents were Romanian Baptists, also very solid, very much involved in the church. So I was blessed with that. And, just to fast forward, I immigrated to United States when I was almost 18. And when I immigrated, I came to California, where I had the blessing to be a part of a church where some of the most famous Romanian Baptist pastors were preaching and serving. So it was Brother Pete Popovic and Brother Liviu Olac. And obviously, Brother Pete Popovic was an excellent preacher, and same with Liviu Olac. But Liviu Olac probably had, both of them had a very, very strong passion for evangelism, for missions. So I'm sure some of that comes from them. But the truth is that, in general, the Romanian Baptist community from that time, I think it was fairly strong on evangelism. And it actually started in that church that we went on a summer mission with Walt Shearer, which is an American who wanted to work with the Romanian community. And we went. My first summer mission was actually in Moldova, in Bukovina, I think. It was in Vatra Dornei. So I think that's how we started working from that church and with this American missionary Walt Shearer. That's how our work started in Romania, and then of course, as time went on, we continue even with Countryside with Charity Cup, and so I'm putting all this information in very small, I'm compressing the information basically. But later on, when I got to Korea and I taught there, one of the strengths of that seminary was it was very mission oriented. So we have something that was called the Toronto strategy. I mean, not the Toronto, the Torch Trinity Strategic Mission, which was a scholarship that was given to students which needed to be prepared from other countries that couldn't afford. So we had about 10 per year. So we gave that kind of scholarship to students from all over Asia and all over the world. Actually, we gave it to some Romanians. Romanians only sent about three or four people. They're all women. We never got a man because he was free basically. But it was that passion for mission that was in that particular seminary that also kind of basically kindled my passion for mission around the world. So to make a long story short, but it's all these steps I think helped. The solid church back home, the passion for mission in our church in Los Angeles, the Romanian Baptist Church, and then later, also the seminary that I served in Asia, in Seoul. And now just to jump very quickly to our time right now. So here at Southwestern, one of the strengths of the seminary is the passion for missions. In fact, we like to brag a little bit that the sun never sets over Southwestern because we have people prepared and people trained and educated here from all over the world. So wherever you go around the world, you're going to find a Southwesterner. And that's something very nice. And even right now, like if I go to my classes, we have students from really all over the world. So that is that is something that, obviously that's very important for us as a seminary. And I think it's very important for every Christian.
Yeah.
So I was compressing kind of a lot of information.
Yeah. So going back to sort of the initial stages with your family, I know you have two brothers. Am I missing anybody? There's three of you, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah.
And I know your parents are very passionate about, growing you close to God, because I met them. And so you came to the States, initially immigrated, sounds like directly to Los Angeles. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
How did that start? I mean, obviously it didn't. How old were you when you came to the States?
Yeah, so I was almost 18. So yeah, I came, and the question people ask you, oh, was it easy, difficult to adjust? And the answer is absolutely not. Probably it was the same for you, Dan. It was not difficult to adjust. We're coming from a communist country. We're happy to escape. We're coming to a very strong church. So there are people coming at the airport to wait for us, from all over Romania who immigrated here. We had an awesome youth. We had awesome pastors. Like I said, Pete Popovic, Lidiola were some of the best pastors. They loved the Lord. They were very serious about the scripture. So I think this was one of the easiest things for me to adjust to life in America. Obviously, it's much better from a material point of view, but it was really a strong church and a strong youth. So it's very, very easy to adjust here. And again, solid preaching, solid teaching, solid music, everything. So, it was nice to be here. Let me put it this way. When we arrived in California, yeah.
So when you got to California, I think you're the middle child, right?
Yeah.
I think is it your brother Vali's older?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have a younger brother who's also a professor, so that's really good. I mean, that's kind of rare in some ways. But anyway, so you were 18. Obviously, at that point, you didn't arrive as like a teenager. You were much older. So what was the path? You went to school. Did you already finish high school?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great point. No, actually, I never finished high school.
In
I
Romania?
never finished because what happened, I have to say in Romanian, pica la treaptă. I mean, basically, I missed the exam from the 10th to 11th grade. So in Romania, I was at the High School of Mathematics and Physics.
Oh,
So just to backtrack a little bit, in Romania, if you're a good student, and I was a good student, you, in my town, at least in Reșița, you went to the best high school, which was the High School of Mathematics and Physics. And usually, actually, they had three major sections. They had mathematics, physics, they had biology, chemistry, and they had philology and history. But the way usually it was, if you were a good student, you went either to mathematics or to the biology section. If you couldn't make it to that, you went to philology, history. Now, looking back now, from what I know and from what I like, I would probably should have started with philology, history. But like I said, I had no interest in biology or chemistry, so I said I'm going to go to mathematics and physics, and that's where I went. But at that time, you had to give an exam from the 10th to 11th grade, and actually I failed that exam. And right after I failed that exam, I found out that my father escaped from the country. He actually escaped from Romania. And I was I thought my father was on a business trip to Bucharest, but he actually escaped from Romania. So I'm thinking in my mind, well, my father's going to come back from the business trip. I'm in trouble because, he's going to not be happy that I failed this exam. But he never showed up because he escaped to Yugoslavia and then to America. So anyway, to make a long story short, I had to go to the Seral, which means that you had to go to evening school, and I had to work. So actually, I worked in Romania as a plumber for 1 year, and then I finished 11th grade, and then I don't think I started 12th grade because I was in the process to come to America. So I only finished 11th grade. And then when I came to America, I didn't speak English very well. In fact, I didn't know very much. So they wouldn't accept me in the high school. They said I was too old, because they didn't want to put me in 11th grade. And in the 12th grade, I didn't know English. So what happened, I basically took the GED, right? I think it's called the GED.
yeah.
Or GED. I took the General Equivalency Diploma. So I started studying a little bit, and I passed the exam, and I guess I got my high school diploma, but I never went to high school in America.
The way you guys escaped communism was because your dad escaped from
Yeah.
Romania. So help, like, take us back to that moment. Obviously you're older. A lot of times when I'm interviewing people from Romania, they're younger, they came here, a lot of stuff they don't remember, but you were older. So help us unpack, how did you find out? I mean, obviously your parents, your mom must have known, right? This was planned. How did,
Yeah.
like, what was your reaction and how did you find out that your dad is not coming back?
Well, I found out eventually, I think my mother told us, I don't remember exactly, probably our mother told us. I don't know, for reactions, I was very happy. In fact, I come from a church just like you, from where a lot of people escaped to America. I escaped and they went to America, and I already had a lot of people from church who already escaped. So, honestly, I didn't. I never thought that my father would do it, because I thought my father was not a very, courageous kind of person, the kind of who takes that risk. So I was actually honestly surprised that he did that. But I was very, very happy. I mean, I remember I almost became like a star. All my friends found out and it's like, "Oh, Chris, what are you gonna do? You're gonna leave." And yeah, I was like very happy. We were all very happy when we heard about that, because just to live America, to live Romania at that time, and to go to America. I mean, it was the dream of every kid. Despite what you might read in some books that people like communism. Personally, I never knew an honest communist. I mean, I'm sure there were some, because otherwise you wouldn't have survived. But all my friends, they liked America. They wanted to escape. They hated Russia and anything like that, or at least they didn't like Russia very much. So no, I was very happy when I found out about that, and I was looking forward to leave.
What year did your dad leave?
So yeah, so that was 1984 when the LA Olympics were in LA. So he escaped then. I don't know if he made it to LA by the time the Olympics started. I don't think he did. But yeah, and we were able to go and join him in 1986. But no, this is 1984. I was about 16 years old, and again, I was happy that he's not coming back to give me maybe some kind of a punishment for failing that exam. And but I was also happy just to leave. My father did have a brother in America already, and like I said, we already had a bunch of friends who left. So now, for me and for everybody, I think we were looking forward to leave the country, even though we love the church and we love the people. But things were tough in Romania at that time from many points of view. So we were looking forward to freedom, to a better life, and of course, obviously, to be together with our father.
So I think for the explanation of our audience who probably hasn't, some of them have not lived those times, essentially you get to come to the United States, it was like winning the lottery as equivalent for most. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, so obviously you found out he's gone. How quickly did you find out that he made it? Because many times being gone doesn't necessarily mean you make it to the States or anywhere else. Many times they were jailed and sent back to Romania.
Yeah, no, we found out fairly quickly, and I don't remember exactly. I'll have to ask my mom, but fairly quickly. And by the way, the way he escaped, he was kind of almost like a sure way, because they've been using this source. So basically, they paid a fisherman, which had a boat on the Danube River. So it cost him about 10,000 lei, which would be, I think, the equivalent of about $12,000 today or something like that. Like basically three salaries or something, or $10,000 to $15,000, which is a lot of money for us at that point. But he was a fairly sure source, and he didn't make it there. And I think usually the Yugoslavians would put you in prison for a couple of weeks just because of illegal crossing of the border. But then I think he was sent in Rome in a United Nations immigrants camp, and we did get some letters fairly quickly. Yeah, so it wasn't a problem for me. Maybe it was more for my mother, because my mother knew that he ran and waiting for the news. I was not waiting for any news because I didn't know that he was trying to escape. I thought he was in a business trip. So I think when we found out from our mother, I think she already
I
knew
see.
that he was safe in Yugoslavia.
I
think
see.
so.
Okay. Okay, so that maybe you told me, but I didn't realize that. But to me, these escape stories are always fascinating. So you get to the United States. I'm assuming I know for this sharing a similar story. I remember I couldn't sleep for nights just knowing that I'm gonna be leaving and coming to the promised land essentially. What was it like for you when you landed in Los Angeles of all places? Do you remember any of that?
So, first of all, when I left, I used to joke with the youth because the youth would say, well, you're leaving. And I used to give them a quotation, I think it was from Jeremiah, don't weep for those who, whatever happened, weep for those who are going away, but I was kind of joking because everybody was like, you know, weeping that I'm going and they're not going with me, right? So, but when we left, actually, so we had a very strong youth. I don't I never really thought about it very much, but the truth is that it must have been a little bit tough to leave too, because we really had a strong youth choir, and people came when we took the train to go to Bucharest. They came at the train station. There's a lot of people there when we left, but of course, there was a lot of people when we arrived too, at the airport, people that we didn't know, but of course, a lot of people that we did know. So we had people from our church who knew us, and I remember, the Radoslavich family, which I think you know. I think they kind of filled I think they went to the equivalent of Costco. I think it was called Price Club. And when we got there, the kitchen was full of M&Ms and some other stuff, which for us was like having all these things. But no, people are extremely friendly. The church was there. Not only they waited for us, but I'm pretty sure at the church there was like a omasa, like there was like a party basically.
Wow.
So there were drinks and things, and it was like a party.
Wow.
And for us even to drink like some Pepsi or Coca-Cola, which you couldn't find in Romania, for us would be like, hey, just even that thing was huge. But no, the welcome was extremely warm, and yeah, friends that actually we knew some of the people, but there's a lot of new people. But again, all Christians, very, very. It was just easy for us to adopt. Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember back in the day when people would come to the US, including when we came, you're right, people were just almost celebrating and inviting you into their house. And we were invited numerous times to go out to dinner or lunch just because they wanted to welcome,
Yeah.
make people feel welcome, on top of the fact that the church really came around them and helped them get acquainted with bringing them stuff to make sure they have stuff for their new beginning. Because you're technically there. Well, we came with like a few baggages and we had to start from zero. Now, your dad kind of went ahead. I'm assuming he had some things prepared.
Let me tell you just quickly a fun story. So when I came to America, one of the things that one of the family that was, again, going back to Romanian days, heard that I said when I was a kid. I guess I said that, man, I wish I could eat a whole chicken, because in Romania you never could afford that, at least not for my family. So this guy invites us to lunch or to dinner, and he prepares the whole chicken and puts it on the plate for me. It's like said, hey, now, you wanted to do that all your life. Now you can do it. Eat this whole chicken. It's like, but I was kind of shy, and I probably ate already enough or something, and I only ate a little bit, and he was kind of disappointed that I didn't eat the whole chicken. But I remember, that was the kind of a funny story. It's like, hey, here now you have a chance to eat a whole chicken. Why don't you eat it here? But yeah, I mean, for us coming from a country where you rarely be able to do that, you couldn't even find maybe the chicken sometimes in the stores. It was kind of interesting. Yeah,
Ironically, now you can go to Costco or anywhere else and they have full chickens you can buy.
I know, I know. And my father was actually renting a house of 3 bedrooms, which was a walking distance from church. And so he had a really good deal because another Christian actually rented it before, and I think the family bought a house. And he did have an old Datsun, and I think not too long after we got there, so he already had a car too. It was like a 1976 Datsun, and this is a 1986. So it was a 10-year-old car, but it was not looking very good. But for us, he was okay. And I think soon after that, he got another car from auction, like a 1980 Toyota Corolla hatchback. I still remember that one. But yeah, we did have a car. We had a house, actually fairly nice house that was rented. but not and some of the basic furniture. But we were blessed when we arrived. It was a really nice house, and walking distance. And he did have a car, but
Yeah.
not much else. He was working for what was then almost like minimum wage. I think he was working for $4 or $5 an hour. So we were not rich or anything, but yeah, we had food and things like that. I was raised in this Baptist family, and like I said, the parents and grandparents were Christians. I was in the church from my birth, so I didn't have anything dramatic. No, so I became a Christian. I got baptized, but I think I was a Christian before that in 1985. So I was about 1983. Sorry, I was about 15 years old. I got baptized at the same time with my older brother, and we got baptized. We raised our hands when it was the preaching of Vasile Talos, who came from a week of, it was a special week of evangelism, and he was preaching, and that's when we raised our hand. But I believe I was a Christian before that. And then that summer we were baptized. But yeah, when I came to United States, I was already a Christian. And like I said, I think I was a Christian ever since I remember, in the sense that I always feared the Lord. I was raised in the fear of the Lord. I always believed that Jesus Christ was, who he said he was, the Son of God who died for my sins. So yeah, I didn't have any dramatic conversion. So I'm blessed to have been brought in a very solid church and with very godly parents, I would say.
Yeah. Very cool. So then, Chris, I want to know basically, how did you get to this point of sort of wanting to teach people and passionate about missions and reaching people all over the world through this method of teaching? Like, how did that happen? Was it something that you wanted from the beginning? Was it somebody that instilled in you this desire? I want to know, like, how did you decide to go that path? Like, if you can take us there.
Oh,
Obviously,
that's a great question.
you're a youngster coming to the States. You could have gone many, many different ways. You could have become an engineer. You could have become a businessman.
No, that's a great question. And again, going back to the high school of mathematics and physics, when I got to America, the same thing happened. Everybody's saying to me, "Hey, you got to go into computer science. This is the future." So notice here that nobody asks you, "Hey, Chris, what do you like? What is your passion?" It's like, "I know this computer science is the future. You should go into that." And just to backtrack a little bit to Romania. Romania, if you remember, in Romania, if you're a good student, you're basically two options. You either were a doctor or you are an engineer. Basically, these are the major options at that point. And like I said, I had no inclination whatsoever toward medical field. So, when I came, engineering, go to computer science, and actually my major in university when I made it. So I went to community college first because it was cheaper. Actually, first I did Control Data Institute. I did like a school for about 8 months to become like a computer repair guy. Actually, I did that. But after that, one of the brothers in the church said, "Hey, Chris, you should go to university. You should do something in the university, because don't just do this technical school." And that's how we started going to I think, to community college. And I went for 2 years, and then we applied for university. And I applied for computer science because everybody said computers is the future. And same with my older brother, Val. But my older brother Val was maybe a little bit smart. After a while, he said, "Look, this is not my thing." He'd switched to business. But for me, it was like, you know what? I started with this. I'm going to graduate with this. And I ended up graduating. But when I went to school to UC San Diego, actually, I had to take two minors, two areas of concentration not related to my major. And one of them, I chose communication because I wanted to improve my communication. And the other one I chose was Judaic studies because I thought, hey, this is an easy A and it's going to improve my GPA. And it was true. At Judaic studies, I had to take introduction to the Bible. I had to do some classes about Old Testament, and I did really well. So anyway, after I graduated, even though I had an internship at NCR and when I Raytheon, after I graduated, I did interview a little bit, but not very much. But I was thinking, you know what? Do I want to do this for the rest of my life? But I was not passionate about this. It was more like, hey, I want to finish my degree. But in the process, as I was taking these courses, I was thinking, hey, you know what? I like the Bible, especially the Old Testament. And I'm thinking I'd rather do something that I like. And I think I saw an ad in Christianity Today about studying at a couple of schools. And I decided then to go and do an MA in biblical studies, actually in Old Testament. But my main goal was non-missional, just to backtrack a little bit. Actually, my goal started at UC San Diego, because at UC San Diego, people had to take some introduction to the Bible classes. And I took an introduction to the Bible class with a very smart professor who finished at Harvard. He was a very smart professor, but he was very liberal. He was a Jewish scholar. And I was thinking as I was taking this class, man, there are so many people who are taking this class and they're losing their faith with this guy. So thank God, because of my theological training and just solid churches, it didn't really affect me. I didn't like the way he was teaching, because he was teaching very biased, very liberal. But I was thinking many people are losing their faith. And my goal initially was to go and study and maybe one day come and teach in a university. And instead of sending people away from God, maybe teaching a university Bible or something and actually help the people build their faith. So that was my initial goal. So I said, I'm going to go to do a master in Old Testament because I like what I'm doing. And I was planning to be a professor just to teach. But my initial intention was to teach actually in a university, like maybe UC San Diego or some secular university, but to teach some of these Bible courses, which are still required in many places for like a background of your kind of like Western civilization. I mean, I know they took them out more and more, but I think they're being reintroduced in some places. And that was the main goal initially. So I found some ads in that Christianity Today, and I think it was between Gordon Conwell, and it was between Wheaton College. And Gordon Conwell, one reason I like Gordon Conwell because they're part of Boston Theological Institute, and because it's part of the Boston Theological Institute, they said that you can take courses at Harvard Divinity School, Boston College, and others. And I thought, hey, that would be kind of nice. So I applied to both of these schools. And to my surprise, because my GPA was like a B minus, I wasn't that good at computer science. I was okay. I wasn't bad, but I wasn't stellar. So I was like a B minus student. So I was surprised they accepted me for the MA. Both schools accepted me, except that Wheaton wanted me to take the GRE. I never knew I had no idea what the GRE was at that point. It's like a graduate exam. So, I didn't really want to take it at that point. So I just kind of went to Gordon Conwell. So, but that's how I got into this field, because it was something that I knew that I liked and I was good at. And the intention was long term to go back to university and maybe teach students, even secular students who are taking these courses, but instead of destroying their faith or, moving even further from faith, maybe, who knows, maybe some of these students will come back and appreciate the scriptures.
Professor was like a catalyst in your life because it sort of gave you some food for thought. Look what he's doing to these people.
Yeah, so actually there were two professors. One was Richard Elliott Friedman, a Jewish guy who wrote a book. It's called Who Wrote the Bible? And his name was under Richard Elliott Friedman. But of course, he didn't say that he wrote the Bible, but he was just he was popularizing some scholarly liberal views. And actually, I had another guy, who was David Noel Friedman. This guy was actually a Christian. He was a more liberal Christian, but I think he was a Christian. And he was a very respected scholar. So actually, I had both of these guys, but the one that I think pushed me more in this direction was Richard Elliott Friedman. But I think David Noel Friedman was also useful just because he represented like good scholarship, but also was a Christian. He was very old at that point. He was an old man, but he was a very, very nice person. And I believe that he was a Christian, that person.
So I do remember some of the years you were at the Gordon College, I believe. That was in Boston?
Gordon Conwell is the seminary. Gordon College is a college like about a few miles away.
I see. Was that what area was that in? I know at one point you were in Toronto. That's a different school?
Yeah, so this is in Massachusetts. So this is in Massachusetts, just north of north of Boston. So yeah, there's a lot of schools there. So you could take courses at Harvard Divinity School, which I did take some when I was there. You could take courses at Boston College, Boston University Theology Department. Yeah, it's a really, as you know, it's like a major university hub.
Professor.
When we were there in the early '90s, mid '90s, it was really a very good school. It was really very highly respected and very good scholars. We really were blessed. And I think we met originally, I think in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, at a youth camp,
Yeah,
Romanian Baptist youth.
it's very
But of
possible.
course, we saw each other. Of course, we saw each other at Romanian like youth things and conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess I brought that up because I remember going to Massachusetts when I was at one point I served as sort of the RBYA, Romanian Youth Association, various roles, and I had to visit some of the churches, and there was a church in Massachusetts, and now I'm just connecting the dots that it was close to Boston, but I know you also went to Toronto. You got involved in a church there with a youth. I remember I visited, or we talked about it many times because you'd bring the youth down, right? But let me ask you this. I wanted to understand why did you end up going into sort of why were you passionate about the Old Testament studies, and what does that mean? What does that encompass? I guess I never understood that. Is that dealing with excavating, dealing with just passages in the Old Testament? What exactly does that encompass?
Yeah, so for me, I always like the Old Testament. I always like to read Old Testament stories. So I remember going to my grandparents in Stinapar, in Karaseverin. So going there, I used to read all kind of Romane. They would say in Romanian, Romane, like all kind of this literature, which was not Christian. And my grandfather was always say, "Why are you reading all these Romane? You should read the Bible." So sometimes he would just give me the Bible to read it, and I would just read the stories of Joshua and Samuel. Those are the ones I like the best, right? I would read that stuff. And I remember my grandfather would say sometimes, "Why are you reading that difficult thing? Why don't you read this letters or gospels?" Like, I'm thinking, what? To me, it was easy to read the stories. Absolutely not Apostle Paul. I'm not sure exactly what he meant. I'm not sure if he said Apostle Paul, but I think he said something in the New Testament. So I always liked the Old Testament. And and the main reason I studied is not only because I liked it, but because I was fairly convinced, and I'm even more so now, that you cannot understand the New Testament and Jesus well until you understand the Old Testament. So that's the reason I wanted to go there. And about excavations, because you're bringing this up, when I was at Gordon Cowell, I was blessed with some great teachers, and one of them, the Hebrew professor, was also the curator at Harvard Yosemite Museum. So they kind of encouraged us to go and visit Israel. And also we went on an excavation. So I went on an excavation. First one I think I went on was in 1995, I believe it was at Ekron. So it was an excavation led by some of the leading biblical archaeologists of the world at that time, like Cy Gittin and Trudy Dothan. Trudy Dothan was, I think, from University of Tel Aviv, I think. And Cy Gittin was the director of the Albright Institute of Archaeology in Jerusalem. So, that's how I started. And I really liked archaeology. It was related to Old Testament. So I've been excavating since then, many other years. So I've been in Israel a lot after that. But it was the connection with Gordon Cowell and then later with University of Toronto, which also I studied with which a very eminent, reputable archaeologist, John Holliday. So because of this, I always like to go to Israel just because obviously Israel is the place where everything happened. And, I just like the culture and the people. And of course, to learn more about archaeology and the Old Testament, it was just very useful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting that it was you were so passionate about it, and that not only did you want to study about it, but obviously teach others about it. So, speaking of archaeology, is it like a documentary where you go and basically all day you're like excavating and trying to clean up the dirt to figure out if you found something?
I'm pretty sure my first seasons were like 7 weeks. So it's 7 weeks. And it depends how people run the excavation. But I think the way we ran it first time, we actually, one of the hardest thing is like you have to wake up very early. You have to wake up very early and like 5 o'clock, maybe even before, because it's very hot in Israel, especially in the summer. So you start excavating very early in the morning. But a good excavation, and I participated in mostly very good excavation, there's excavation. There's also school, sometimes in the evening, where actually that was also good because you have these directors teaching, but not only those directors, you have directors from other excavations which come and visit. So we heard from some of the best scholars, like so we had professors from Harvard, University of Chicago, and other places who would come and teach. So we would also do a course on archaeology. And there was also like pottery reading. So you would also read the pottery. I mean, we wouldn't read it, the experts. We would just look at them and they would look at this. Oh, this is late bronze, we're looking, man, it looks the same to us. But there would be like pottery reading and washing. What we would do, we would wash the pottery when we came back after the break. But basically, a typical day, you had about 6-7 hours of excavation. You had some pottery reading, you had some schooling, and of course there was some free time. And during the weekend, the best excavations would also have like a trip to an archaeological site where you would go and learn something. And there, of course, would be some free time too, where you would just go around the country, which is very small, so you can go from one end of the country to the others in a few hours.
Yeah.
But that was what typically was. So you would meet people from all over the world because you had people from other universities, from other countries. It was really a fascinating experience, and it was a great learning experience. But it could be tough, because it got hot, and you would be exhausted after a while. So 7 weeks, it's a long time.
So tell us maybe, in your opinion, what was the most impacting experience you had excavating? Was there a specific site that you like it just stayed with you and you really remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough question, but I did excavate at Ekron. Just to mention some of the major, I excavated at Ekron Megiddo. Megiddo is also a major one. I excavated at Tel Dan. Actually, that was my last excavation because the war started with Lebanon, so that was cut short. That was in 2006. I haven't excavated lately, but I'm thinking about, just because of this school, to get back in the field at least occasionally. But if I was to think about the greatest experience, was I think it was in 1995, actually, first year, when we were there, and we had the biggest find of the whole season in the whole country. So what happened? Some of my friends, including a friend from Gordon Cowell, they were sweeping at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, you're supposed to sweep. Believe it or not, you're digging, it's dirt, but you're still supposed to sweep and leave it clean because, you can see things. So these people were sweeping in their square, and one of them was actually a Canadian guy, saw like something sticking from the ground. It looked like it was a piece of wire. So, and when you see something sticking from the ground, one of the rules of archaeology is you do not take it out. You just leave it there because you have to measure, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this guy, I was at the end of the day, just, it was like kind of a little bit of maybe of a joker. He just takes the wire and just pulls it out of the ground. And it turns out that it was a golden cobra. It was a golden cobra. Thank God it didn't break. Actually, I think I saw the cobra afterwards. I saw it because this guy and my friend from Gordon Cowell, they brought it there. And I think we saw it before the photographers, before they took the official photographies. We took it and everything. But I'm pretty sure that was the greatest find that year in Israel. It appeared, I think, on the cover of the BAR. It was called Bible Archaeology Review, and it was just a great golden cobra, which was probably worn by an Egyptian official. Like the Egyptian official would wear it. There was probably an Egyptian official which was in charge of the city of Ekron at that point, because he was under Egyptian occupation. Sometimes I think around maybe 700 years before Christ. But that's one history. That's one story that is stuck to my mind because it was really the greatest find that I think I was probably part of in all of these excavations. Because unfortunately, most of the times, what you find there is broken pottery and bones of dead people, or dead animals. So it's not very exciting from many points of view, but sometimes you do find some interesting finds, some interesting things.
Now, that I think that's fascinating, because I guess the feeling that I have just from the outside looking in, you're in the middle of like you said, where everything kind of happened in the Holy Land. And at any corner, you could find something that could be, first of all, world changing in some way. And then second of all, could like kind of confirm your faith. Do you have any input for us, for the audience, that sort of strengthen your faith, sort of being on the ground in Israel? And then number two, just studying the Old Testament. Can you share some nuggets with the audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'll tell you what. Usually, when you escalate in Israel, unfortunately, it usually doesn't help to strengthen your faith. It's actually the opposite because I was surrounded by mostly liberal people. So a lot of these people are very liberal, including many of the students. So if you want to strengthen your faith, I do not recommend going on archaeology. Not only that, but there are many times people are there just to have fun. Like many of them are not Christians. You do have some Christians, but it's usually a minority. And, so I would not recommend it for strengthening your faith. I mean, the only reason I would recommend it is because you could strengthen your faith by learning some of the things and how to combat some of the stuff. Because one thing that I learned in archaeological excavations is how unsure they are about what they discover. It was kind of funny sometimes to hear some of these experts looking at the same thing and saying completely different things from one thing. So one thing that I learned, and which maybe helps with the faith, is that like, well, if an expert in archaeology says something, don't take it for something as being sure, because many times they are wrong. And what I can say again, just from my general study of archaeology and Old Testament, and what I tell my students when they hear some archaeological discovery that contradicts the Bible, my advice to them is very simple. I say, just wait for a second. Just wait for a second, because they're going to reevaluate this. Or there's an archaeologist that is more discerning. Sometimes even a liberal one will say, well, that's not exactly what that proves or that shows. So one of the things that I learned is that in general, if you wait long enough and if you study the things well enough, you will see that they're not going to disprove the Bible. They're going to support the Bible. So that's what I would say. But in the long run, things that are discovered and things that we learn are going to show that the Bible is true, and is what they say, it's valid. Again, for this you have to read well the Bible. You have to read carefully the Bible, not to read in the Bible things that are not there. And also you have to interpret archaeology right too, and understand that archaeology can only show you so much. Archaeology ultimately, even though you have some people who are called pure archaeologists, so this was a debate at one point. In fact, even the Bible archaeologists they changed the name. They said, "No, let's not call it like that because we don't want to use the Bible. We want to be pure archaeologists. Just look at the data and make our conclusions." But usually you cannot make your conclusion just by looking at the data, because you need some kind of historical background to figure out what that is. So even these so-called pure archaeologists, ultimately, they still appeal to the Bible, but they appeal to the Bible usually only when they want to and when they feel like. I mean, it's a difficult subject, and it's a long subject, but for me, it has helped me to understand better how archaeologists think, and also to understand how much archaeology can show.
So, from your sort of knowledge of just studying the Old Testament, which obviously is a different level than most people in the church, is there something that sort of stood out to you as like a sort of a factor for growing your faith, or that it proves the Bible is true? Because you kind of have a unique perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing lately, especially, it's been the Book of Psalms. So for me, the Book of Psalms. I don't know if you know. So my specialty is mostly wisdom literature and the Book of Psalms. And for me, what I'm trying to do in the next few years, God willing, I'm trying to bring these books more into the church for spiritual formation. I think what is lacking in the churches is spiritual formation. Everybody's talking about discipleship, which is very good. But you cannot do discipleship without the book of Psalms, for example. The book of Psalms is very important for spiritual formation because it not only teaches you how to pray, but teaches you some very important things about God. The book of Psalms, historically in the church, has been very important for singing hymns. So the church used to sing almost only the Psalms. I'm not saying we should do that now. I definitely think that we should reintroduce the book of Psalms in the singing of the church. So you should sing at least one psalm per week, in my opinion. But for me, what's very important these days and very strengthening for my faith is the singing of the psalms. So, for example, I sing a psalm every morning. Now you might ask yourself, how do I know the melody? But I don't know the melody. I make it up, as much as possible, as much as possible. If I'm not with somebody else, like if I have the space, I would try to sing a psalm. But to me, it's very important for spiritual formation, the book of Psalms and also the book of Proverbs. Book of Proverbs, because a lot of, it's very important for discipline, for discernment. So I think these are some books that are very little used these days in churches. Everybody talks about discipleship, but I think the best discipleship you can do is by memorizing, singing the book of Psalms, and also by learning more about the book of Proverbs. So this is my focus these days a lot more. So I'm working on a few things about this. But this is, to me, what is strengthening my faith a lot and has been very, very helpful. Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, I guess let me ask you why that? Why the Book of Psalms? And because technically you could say that's more of a poetic book. So I'm just curious why you feel that way.
Historically, the book of Psalms was very important in the church. So again, it was sung. And, like even if you look at some of the earliest translations of the Bible, so like that, for example, King Alfred of England actually had a copy of the book of Psalms with him. And he was reading them, I was praying them. And of course, this is the prayer book and the hymn book of ancient Israel, but it was also the prayer book of the early church. So it's like this not recovering the book of Psalms is not something novel. It's always been the case. And also the book of Psalms is like a small Bible. This is an expression used by Martin Luther. Because if you think about the Bible, the Old Testament, it has law, it has prophets, and it has historical. The book of Psalms has all these three. So in the book of Psalms, you have Psalms of Torah. You also have some historical Psalms. And of course, you have also historical Psalms, and you also have prophetic Psalms. So you have all these three in the book of Psalms. It's easier to memorize. It's easier to remember. And the best way to learn theology, Dan, because you grew up like me, it's actually by singing it. By singing it. When you sing, if you hear a sermon, you might agree or you might disagree. If you read something, you might agree or disagree. But when you sing it, you're almost committing yourself to what you sing. If you say, I have decided to follow Jesus, and you sing it, it's different than just from reading a confession or reading a passage from the Bible. So actually, not only that, but it's also touching your emotions. When you sing, touching your emotions. So it's very, very powerful. And, you might have heard about this quotation. I think it's from Andrew Fletcher, a Scottish guy who said, let me write the hymns of a country and I don't care who writes its laws. And this guy was a politician. He was preoccupied about writing the laws, but he realized the power of the song. So that's why I think the Psalms, if they are rightly used, we should use it. We should sing them. We should memorize them. If you don't sing it, but you're a good singer, you could sing it too.
Yeah, I don't know.
But like I said, make up your melody. If you don't know, just make up your melody and sing it because it sticks to your mind better. But it also teaches you theology. When you say, when you pray to God, oh Lord, help me, you imply that God has the power to help you and things like that. So, I have no doubt that because of the way it's been used throughout history, the Psalms have a power. And again, missionaries, when they translate the Bible, usually they translate the New Testament first because of lack of resources. But many times they also translate the book of Psalms. And you probably have seen those New Testaments that are given around. They have the New Testament and the Psalms because they realize the importance of the text. Yeah.
Okay, so what is your favorite sort of psalm? Is there evidence that it's sort of accurately whoever is written that wrote those songs, those psalms, is who it is? Is that accurate?
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not too concerned about that. I just take if it's a Psalm of David, even though it could be read as Psalm for David, in all fairness, in Hebrew, it could be read both ways. But historically, it has been read as Psalm of David. But again, I wouldn't debate that much these things, even though I believe it. I believe the way they are given, and there are some differences between the Hebrew and the Greek. So the Greek might attribute these psalms to David, which the Hebrew doesn't. So there is a little bit of contradiction there, but not that much. But I wouldn't be too worried about that. The important point that we have to be aware of that these are hymns that were inspired by the Holy Spirit. So I wouldn't major in minors. Again, I'm not saying that it's not important, but for me personally, I'm not going to debate this with the liberals because, I personally believe that if it says the Psalm of David, it belongs to David, but it's not that relevant to me. Ultimately, it was inspired by the Holy Spirit, and I think that that's what's important. And as far as the favorite psalm, I have a bunch of them, but probably some of the more favorite ones are, like obviously 23, everybody likes it. But I also like 73. 73 is a very important one. 73 and 121 is, of course, is a favorite one, and a few others. Yeah, but these are 133, 131, 133. Behold, how pleasant and brothers to dwell together in unity. We can sing that one. Hinematov. So I like to sing mine in Hebrew as much as possible, and to read them in Hebrew in the morning. But I do like to, of course, also sing them in English and in Romanian.
So that's interesting. So you're saying singing has a different has an extra dynamic to it, or an extra, and then you're also saying you would read them in Hebrew. Is that the original language?
Yeah. I mean, I try to read them and sing them in that language in the morning at least. And speaking about singing the Psalms, I strongly recommend it. You probably are familiar with Shane and Shane, but there's a few other authors which are right now are putting the Psalms in song. So you don't really have to make up your melody. There's a lot of projects right now that they are trying to put the book of Psalms, in music. Some of them do a better job than others. Like, for example, Shane and Shane just takes parts of the Psalms, but there are some people who try to put the whole Psalm. And so I strongly recommend that you familiarize yourself with that, because there are some really good versions out there. Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, you probably had to take a much deeper dive in the Old Testament. I'm assuming in the background and the accuracy. Do you have any interesting insights that you can share with the audience, sort of from your deep dive in that, and some nuggets that come to mind?
Yeah, so I just recommend, read good books. There are some good books out there. So, like, if you are interested in a more historical part, I recommend On the Reliability of the Old Testament by Kenneth Kitchen. So, Kenneth Kitchen, I think, recently left us, but he was a guy just like John Stott who never married, who was one of the most famous Egyptologists in the world. He was an evangelical, but he was a very respected Egyptologist from University of Liverpool. But he wrote an excellent book on the reliability of the Old Testament. It's about 15, 20 years old now, maybe less than 20 years, but it's very good. And another one written by Old Testament scholar that I strongly recommend if you are struggling with certain things, is the book by Christopher Wright, which is called The God I Don't Understand. So Christopher Wright kind of took the place of John Stott after John Stott passed away. So these are two very, very good books that deal with some of the issues in the Old Testament, and they engage with some of the questions that people have. But from the archaeological, historical side, this is an excellent book by Kenneth Kitchen. Again, excellent Egyptologist, but also somebody who knew the Bible very well and loved the Bible. So I would say these are a couple of the books that I think are very, very good for people to look at. Yeah.
What's your favorite sort of story in the Old Testament, if you would, that, I don't know, resonated with you the most? Or
That's a tough one. I really like the story of Naaman, the Syrian who's coming to be healed from his leprosy. I think that's just a great story to see how God worked through these nameless people because if you look at it in the story of Naaman, it was very interesting. God works through nameless people. There's a nameless girl who sends a Naaman to the land of Israel. And ultimately, this person is healed, of course, is healed by a prophet that he never sees. He never shows up. He sends his servant. But also, he's also healed because his servants tell him, hey, if the prophet had told you something hard, wouldn't you have done it? He gets mad. If you remember the story, Naaman gets mad. Why didn't he come? I thought he's going to do this and this. And he wanted to go back to his country. He would have gone back as a leper. But his servants, again, we don't know their names. His servant says, if you would have asked you something hard, you would have done it. So it's a beautiful story that shows how God works through people whose names we don't even know. And it's just a beautiful story also, the conversion of this person to the true God of Israel. So that's probably one of my favorite stories
No,
in the Old
interesting.
Testament.
Yeah.
It's a great sermon. If you want to listen, I think it's a great sermon by Tim Keller about this. It's really, really powerful. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Very nice. Very cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much for kind of enlightening us a little bit. Like I said, I wanted to broaden the horizon from a Old Testament standpoint. So you ended up going to some of these schools. In the end, you graduated. Maybe you can share with us what happened after that and how you ended up, I guess, in Korea, because I believe that was that one of your first sort of major assignments?
Yeah, so after I finished Toronto, I came back to my home church in California as a youth pastor, and then after about a year, I became like an assistant pastor or associate or assistant. So I was serving there at that church, and I really enjoyed it. We had a good community. But this opportunity came to teach in Korea and to teach in Korea at a seminary. And even though I left the pastoral job, and I've done a lot of pastoral work before and after that, the truth is that because of my preparation was for Old Testament, I thought that this is something that God opened up for me. So I did end up going to Korea in Seoul at Torch Trinity Graduate University to teach Old Testament. And it was really a great experience because it was a seminary and a church which was very mission oriented. Again, it was very international. We had Koreans, we had Korean Americans, Korean Canadians, Korean Australians, but we also had people from all over the world, from China, like I said, even Romania. We had people, some from South America, not very many, but we also had Africa, and of course, lots from Asia. We even had people from Iraq. So it was a great atmosphere because again, I was very, very international and very mission oriented. So I had a blessed experience there. All my children were born there in the same hospital. So when I went there, I got I met my wife on a charity cup trip with you guys in 2004. I ended up marrying her in 2005. We got engaged in 2004. We got married in 2005. And in 2006, I moved to Korea, and my wife was, asked her, hey, do you want to move to Korea? Is it okay with you? And she said, she's kind of like, almost like, tell me you want to pack. She was the kind of person which was very open to that. So yeah, less than a year after the marriage, we moved to Korea, and we were there. I was there for 16 years. I thought I was going to go there for 4 or 5 years, then come back and maybe teach in America. But God had other plans, and I ended up staying there for about 16 years. And, I only went, I think, one time, and I excavated in 2006 at Tel Dan. And then I also taught for one semester in Jordan because I was actually, just to tell you a story, I don't want to keep it too long, but when I was hired by the Korean school, I was called an angel professor. So let me just explain to you. When I was interviewed for this job in LA by the pastor and the president, the pastor of this major school.
Yeah.
And the pastor asked me, hey, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? And I kind of said, ideally in 10 years, I would be the kind of professor that I can do one semester in Korea and one semester I can do somewhere else where it's needed, preferably, I said, in a Muslim country. And this president and pastor, who was very old, but he was very open. So he came up with this idea. Okay, I'm going to hire this guy as an angel professor. He called me an angel professor because he wanted me to do exactly what I wanted to do. He said, you're going to teach a semester here and you can teach a semester somewhere else, preferably, like in a Muslim country. Now, to make a long story short, that didn't really materialize because of various bureaucratic things. Especially in the beginning, I needed some time for adjustment. But I ended up in 2008. Actually, they did let me go for one semester, and I taught one semester. I was together with my wife, and by this time I had a child. My child was maybe a year old, so I was able to go for a whole semester and teach in Jordan at the Evangelical Seminary there. But that's how I was hired as an angel professor. Now, after that, I still went and taught abroad, but it wasn't for a whole semester. They would let me go just maybe for modulars. But that's how it started. That's how it started. I was hired as an angel professor. And I think the first time when I went, they kind of did like a commission in the chapel and they gave me some angel wings to wear. It's kind of interesting. But that's how it started. And so it was from the very beginning, this orientation to try to help the world which doesn't have access to theological education. So I was trying to go to places where they needed the education, but they didn't have professors in their language. But that's how we started.
I mean, I think that's interesting that you wanted to go in hostile countries and teach, because I would say most people wouldn't want to do that, especially with the family.
Yeah, well, it wasn't hostile. To be honest, Jordan is not hostile. I mean, I wanted to go to Muslim countries, but not necessarily hostile. So actually, Jordan was not hostile at that point. He was actually quite nice. But it's a country where the Christians are in a minority, and where they really do not have enough qualified people. Even now at that seminary, I would say they don't have enough qualified people with degrees to teach, so the seminary will be accredited.
Why did you want to go to Muslim countries? Because obviously it's much easier to go to a Christian country, and even Korea
Right. Yeah. Well,
was
that's a
that
good
way, right?
question. I can't remember how this passion of mine started. I also kind of liked Arabic. I started studying a little bit of Arabic, and because it's a Semitic language, But I guess also maybe from my interaction with some students at University of Toronto. University of Toronto is very diverse, so I remember having some Iranian friends. I always had kind of a passion for the Muslim world to reach out to the Muslims. So, but honestly, I cannot remember where this passion came from.
Yeah.
But I know it was there when I talked to the professor in the interview, and that's how I started serving in in places like Jordan, and I was looking at others. But I ended up afterwards going into places like Nepal, places like India. I guess it's also because it's such a great need. It's such a great need, and there's so few Christians in most Muslim countries. So probably that's another reason why I wanted to be there. And of course, I always liked the Middle East because most of the stories of the Bible take place in the Middle East. So probably that's also the reason.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of take it, not take it for granted, but you take yourself for granted that this is like, oh, normal. I could just go, but it's not normal because not everybody wishes that. But I think that's commendable. This also reminds me a little bit of maybe backtracking the story during this whole entire time prior to you starting coming back to California to be a youth pastor. You were very involved for a few years on the mission trips in Moldova, which is kind of how you met your wife eventually. But I remember one of the projects you were involved in was pretty much trying to figure out a strategy to send more missionaries in the Republic of Moldova, right? And I remember there was a project with Filu, Banu, and some other folks. Can you take us to that and just tell us a little bit about how that went?
Yeah, actually, just to correct, when I met my wife, I was in a team with Filu and also with Sorin Kretz.
That's right.
You might remember.
Correct.
So we that team, and actually our goal at that point was to plant a church, and we were looking to be where's the best place to plant a church, because as you know better than me, Charity Kappa was working in a lot of sports, but you guys, as you matured, you realized the importance of planting churches. And that was at one point when you guys were especially saying, hey, let's look and analyze where's the best place to plant a church. Obviously, the most important thing is not so much the place, but the worker, right? And that's part of the project that we were working with when I met my wife. And I think all three of us who were on that team got married within a year of each other. The other two already had they already had girlfriends. But yeah, I met my wife there on the field, and yeah. But we were looking at especially the best place to plant a church in Moldova at that point.
Yeah, I remember
I
that
think,
project, and just recently I saw a recent video from that time, and I remember you, Philo, and Sorin were featured in the video. There was a
yeah,
lot of great times. Besides, I don't want to make it sound like it was all like, just
yeah.
our heads down and work, but we made a lot of great friendships. We had a lot of awesome memories. But why did you choose that project out of all the projects? There were quite a few projects going on that year. Just curious what made you
I
choose
think
that project, or I don't know, maybe they made you go on that project.
I think you guys put me on that project, but this reminds me of another project. Like when I did it with Countryside, that's kind of odd because I think I was in the seminary, and they put me in a project to dig some
Ditches, you mean?
to dig some ditches, which I didn't mind. Actually, I had a great time. Serene was also part of that. I just thought a little bit, that maybe they weren't using whatever I prepared for it as much as, maybe they could have. But I enjoyed it. It was just great fellowship, and I was actually with a couple of guys from Emmanuel actually. And that trip, we were digging ditches and talking theology, and it was Aline Chintan was actually on that trip. I'm sure you know Aline from California. But you guys probably were thinking, hey, this guy is in seminary, so maybe I probably was in seminary at that time where I was working with the church too. You guys knew me because we worked together a lot. And you probably thought, hey, this would be a good guy to be on that team. And I think that's how it happened. I don't think I asked for that. I usually don't ask for something. I just go whatever the leaders decide it's the right place.
Yeah, that's one of the things I always appreciate about you. Although you had this pretty higher education, you're always very humble and didn't really wear that on your sleeve for everybody to know. And I always appreciated that. You didn't demand, like, I need you guys to, respect my credentials. So as a friend, I always appreciated that. And just, I think as a believer, I appreciate that. So, um,
Well, I don't want to be like the guy who got the medal for being the more humble person in the church. He got a medal. And then I heard that they took it from him because next Sunday he was wearing it at church. So they said, hey, what? Let's take it back because, no, just kidding. I remember about that illustration about, you know, and I remember about C.S. Lewis, It's funny, yeah. I
it is
remember about
funny with
C.S.
the
Lewis.
medal. I remember that one.
I know. I remember about C.S. Lewis about humility. He said basically it took, I think in his chapter on pride. It is funny, yeah, I agree. On his chapter on pride, he basically says that there are two kinds of people. The people who are proud and they think they're humble, and the people who are humble but they think they're proud and they still have to work on it. And the truth is that if you see yourself proud, you are half of the way to working on that problem. But if you think you are humble, so I don't think I'm humble. But thanks for your evaluation. Anyway, I'm not gonna wear a medal next time we meet because I don't want you to take it from me. But yeah,
So did you guys
it
end
is.
up deciding on a next spot for where we planted a church? I don't remember exactly how that went, but
Yeah, to be honest, I don't remember either exactly what we wanted, but I think we made a good decision. I don't know what happened eventually. Yeah,
yeah. But
you guys took
yeah,
over from that, and yeah,
there was quite a few projects. So like I said, there was other projects going on at the same time, but you guys were chosen for that specific project, and I remember you probably came back with some kind of a report, and I don't remember if it got implemented in the next few years. I assume they did. I want to say
yeah,
they most likely did. But anyway, your heart was into church planting and expanding the kingdom always, and that was another example of that. So kind of coming back to world of teaching. You're dealing with a lot of young souls, I assume. Obviously, maybe there's some older students, but overall, there's a lot of young people. Well, like, what caused this passion in you to deal with that and to teach people? Was it something you always dreamed of doing?
Yeah, as I mentioned, initially I did want to teach in a university, and I ideally, and maybe if God opens, I mean, I'm not looking right now, but I'm not looking, but that was the initial goal, to teach in a secular university where people teach the intro to the Bible, and instead of people losing their faith, actually to realize the importance of the Bible, maybe some of them come to faith, and if they're faithful already, to strengthen their faith. So just as a parenthesis, after I graduated from Toronto, I had a chance actually to teach a course at University of Toronto. It was a course on wisdom literature, and I had some Jewish people, and I had some. I know I had a Christian at least in that class, and the Christian was very happy about the way I was teaching, because I was not teaching to destroy the people's faith. I was actually teaching them to go deeper. And but that was the initial goal. But obviously, teaching is very, very impactful, around the world. And maybe you'll give me time later, but I just want to say that that's one of the main ministries that I have right now. Besides this, but it's basically the same thing, except that I'm teaching at the seminary here, and the people come from all over the world here to be trained, and they go back to their countries, and they're going to be leaders. And the same thing happened in Korea. But I also do the ministry with TLI, Training Leader International, where we go all over the world in places where they don't have access. And I strongly believe that these guys are the future pastors, the future missionaries. They are the future, presidents of seminaries and stuff like that. So I think, by God's grace, if these people are well trained, they can have a great impact in their countries and beyond, because some of them might send missionaries. But I'm not good at carpentry. I'm not a good electrician. I'm not a good engineer, but I'm a decent teacher, professor, and this is what I know how to do. And I think it's important, again, to have a trained pastor, just like like you have trained pastors in your church, to have pastors who love the Word of God and know it well. And I think this has always had a great impact for the kingdom around the world, and will always have. So this is what I know how to do, and this is what I want to do, and basically train people to be good preachers and good ministers of the gospel, to love the word and to preach it well, because God can use this for His kingdom in amazing ways.
Or you're obviously impacting lives that are gonna potentially turn around and impact a bunch of other lives, and not only that, but it'll impact generations potentially because of what you're teaching. How do you feel about that? Because every time you step into a classroom, you got hundreds of students, I assume. You're really impacting them for the next generation. Wanted to mention that I remember Charlie Kirk, he was saying that the reason he started his ministry was at one point when he was 18, he realized that unless somebody stepped in this gap of teaching young men, nobody was going to do it, and the schools are going to turn around and pretty much educate them the way they were going to educate them. Kind of like the thought you had back at University of, I think it was UC, right? University of California. He had that same thought and said, who is going to step in and change this generation? Because otherwise there is no hope for this country and really for these young people. I don't know. Does how does that weight feel now that every time you step into a classroom, because you have a lot of responsibility on you?
Yeah, there is but again, it's a little bit different than the Charlie Kirk, just because he was also engaging glad with non-believers. It would be similar, of course, if I was able to go like to University of Texas or somewhere else. But then I don't. Just for the record, I usually don't have hundreds of students. I do have some classes here, but it's because they're mixed. So like if you take together all the online and offline students, I might get close to 100, but usually they're not as large. And especially when we work with TLI, I would say the classes are usually under 15. So we work, but it's better that way, because you don't have 100 students in this particular thing. And some of the best schools that we work with in Asia have actually very good mentors. So we do go there, and we do like an intensive 1 week, and we stay with them, we talk with them, maybe that we eat with them. But it's also the mentors, which are very, very key, who stay with them and continue to mentor them. So, for us, it's very important to do this mentoring stuff with the locals. But, yeah, the responsibility is great. But again, like I said, for us, it's a little bit different because these are friendly people in the sense that they want to learn and they want to train for the ministry. So it's not so much convincing them about the truth of the gospel. They already are believers. We just have to show them about the value of the gospel and, the beauty of the Bible and the importance for spiritual growth and for ministry.
So I
But
want to
it's,
tell
it's a
you,
privilege. It's a privilege. It's not easy. You have to pray a lot and work hard, but God works.
yeah,
Sorry.
I want to tell you that, yeah, so I was referring probably just over the years, you probably had a chance to teach hundreds of people. I think your strength is that, first of all, you're a very down to earth guy. I could totally see you, students coming up to you and you talk to them just like a normal, regular guy. I don't know. I've never seen you necessarily in the classroom environment, but that's how you come across all the interactions I had. And to me, that's a huge strength that you don't take yourself that seriously to the level where you see people below you, but you see everybody at sort of your level or sometimes above. And I think that means a lot, and that's very impacting. That's how I know you through the years, and I think that's it's probably good that you don't know that, but I want to just tell you that I think that's how you probably made an impact, a lot of impact on a lot of students without you even realizing, just being their friend and talking to them on a sort of playing field, the same playing field. I could see
Mm.
you playing ping pong with them in the arena outside, and then teaching them in the classroom, and it's all the same to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, actually, I just found out that one student of mine from Asia just named his baby Christian. So supposedly after me, he was a good student and he's a dear student. And I was happy to hear that he named his son Christian. So yeah.
I'm telling you, I don't think you realize that, and that's probably good because it's better that you have a reward for that in heaven. But I always knew you as that type of person, and I could see the people that you're teaching. So, regarding Korea, just another question. I mean, you packed your stuff, moved across the world, and pretty much started a whole new country, a whole new society. Just real quick, how was that experience? I mean, was it a culture shock for you? Did it take a long time to, like, God, where did you bring me? Why here? I want to be with my family, or at least in Romania or somewhere familiar. Did that at all come in play, or even with Ika, as you guys moved to this strange land?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, to be honest, it wasn't that difficult. Again, for me, it was easier usually than for Ika, I would say, even though for her it wasn't that difficult either. Thank God we were in South Korea, just for the record, not North Korea. Sometimes people ask me, it's a very, very big difference between the two. South Korea, when we got there, was already a very advanced country. So, we had like a 4-bedroom apartment. We didn't have any kids. It was a fairly nice apartment. We had good faculty, many of them Korean Americans who knew the culture, and we adjusted well. There were also some good English ministries that we were involved in. So I wouldn't say it wasn't very difficult for us to adjust. I think it was more difficult when the kids came, and my wife was a little bit maybe lonely sometimes. But for me, it was not that difficult. And the truth is that you know me again. I usually adjust fairly well to various cultures and even temperatures. So so no, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was a culture shock. Uh, it was good colleagues. It was good students. It was good facilities. So again, we didn't really lack things. Uh, you know, uh, yeah, there was that language barrier, and there are some things that the biggest problem obviously was the lack of family, and this is even especially after we had children. So a lot of people don't realize, when they talk about missionaries, they say, well, they're in a rich country and they have money. And it's true. Sometimes missionaries have very good places and they have even the money. But the biggest loss, obviously, is the fact that my children grew up without grandparents, pretty much. And, you don't have a sister or a brother to be around the corner. So ever since I got back in the States, this is something that I've always been jealous of, to see people who have all their brothers or sisters in the same area. The grandparents are there. You have to take the child to a soccer game. Oh, I cannot go. Well, okay, no problem. I'm calling my father or my mother or my sister. There's nothing like that there. So even if some missionaries are in a country where it's very rich and they have all the conditions, this is definitely the biggest loss. The fact that even if you have church members, church members are different than your sister or your brother or your mother. So I think that's the biggest difficulty. So I always regret, I'll be honest, that my kids grew up without grandparents,
I see.
technically speaking.
Yeah, so there
Uh,
was it was a sacrifice in that sense. Yeah. Anyway, so TLI, I know I'm somewhat familiar with it, but I think that's another cool part of your journey. That was the next sort of phase. You guys are teaching pastors all across the world, or pastors and other teachers, right?
this mission started by Darren Carlson in cooperation with the Bethlehem Baptist Church in Minnesota. But it started because we believe that about 80%, maybe even more, 85% of the pastors around the world, they do not have any formal training. Again, we think about America, sometimes we think about even Romania, which, you have so many people who went through seminaries. I mean, in my church right now, it's a Baptist church. I think we have at least 15. It's a small church. It's less than 200 members. I think at least 15 members, but it could be as many as 25, have a seminary degree. Have a seminary. They're not pastors. We have 5 elders. 3 of them are preaching. They're paid, 3 pastors and 200 members. And like I said, at least I would say 15 have an MDiv, Master of Divinity, and we probably have 20 students from the seminary right now. So you can imagine. And sometimes people think, well, we have so many pastors around here. I think in America you have a pastor for 240 people. But if you go on the rest of the world, you have a pastor to maybe 200,000 people, or even worse. I don't know the exact numbers right now. But this is the great need, basically. We are pampered. Americans, even Romanians have Pentecostal seminary, they have Baptist seminaries. You have 10, 20, 30 students. But there are places around the world that they have absolutely no training, even some basic training. And this is where TLI comes in, and we help teach at seminaries, but we also have to teach not just seminaries, just people who want to improve their preaching skills. So we have our most basic and most popular program is one that is really a 9-course. We have 9 courses which are taught 3 per year. And we teach like how to preach narrative, how to preach the prophets, how to preach gospel. And that's the most popular program. And that's directed to people who don't want to get a degree, who just want to improve their teaching and preaching abilities. And the way we design it is that the people who come, they're supposed to go back home and teach somebody in their church and maybe bring them from the second course. So if they teach this course to us, let's say they take the first course and they teach to somebody else, that somebody else can come and join us in the second course. They don't have to come in the first because this guy already taught it.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, all our programs are meant not to make these people dependent on us, but we want to make them teach the courses themselves. And of course, at the seminary level, we want some of their students, some of the brightest, to get a degree and return to that school. So ultimately, that's our goal, is that we want these people to be teachers. And it's succeeded for us in many places. Like, for example, in Ghana, so many times we go into a country and we do this, and then the people in the country, they continue to do this ministry with the pastors around them. So like, for example, in Ghana, I'm pretty sure we're not there anymore because we already have enough people trained that they can continue the training themselves. So many times when we work with these, I mean, almost always when we work with these countries, when we use these courses, they're actually translated in their language. And very early on, we work with trainers from the country. So they teach part of the course in the beginning, and then they teach the whole course. So, but this is basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to help pastors around the world to have better training on how to preach the gospel and to understand the Bible better, because of course there's many heresies out there, like for example the prosperity gospel in Africa, and the reason is because many of these people are not really trained well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
but that's what
you're helping them fish rather than just giving them fish. You're teaching them how to
right.
fish continuously.
That's right.
So that kind of brings us to sort of the recent place you're at, which is a Southwestern. Can you tell us exactly maybe what your role is there and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of Old Testament, and I also teach. So I usually teach courses in Old Testament, and I also teach the language. So like right now, I'm teaching Hebrew.
Hebrew,
I'm
okay.
also teaching Hebrew and Introduction to Old Testament, but I'm also teaching more advanced courses. So like right now, I'm teaching a course on the Book of Job. So this is a bit more advanced, and I'm teaching a PhD level course on wisdom literature because again, that's kind of my focus. So and it's beautiful. Like for example, in my wisdom literature and Job course, we do have a lot of Koreans, but I have in some courses I had students from from China, like I said, Korea, of course. There's America, had from Myanmar, and so again, very uh, a lot of diversity. And also, it's exciting because we're beginning to have more PhD students. So I have some, we have some good PhD students. Like right now, we have two students which were both missionaries. One is a missionary in Asia, and one was a missionary in Colombia. And both of them seem very serious in their study of Old Testament. I also have another PhD student, new one. He's actually from China, but he's I think a U.S. citizen, but his mother is still in China, and I think he has a heart for China. So it's exciting because not only we have a lot of students at the introductory level, but we also have at the more advanced level we have students who want to continue studying and maybe go back to those countries and work in the seminaries there, or maybe even start something there. I think the student from Asia has a great potential to go back there and maybe start a school, like a school in that area, which is an area which very few Christians uh, in Asia. Yeah.
Yeah, I that's awesome. Do you find that fulfilling? I mean, I'm assuming you do that. This guy that you're now teaching here could potentially move and to a whole nother country and impact somebody there. And it's like all these people that are going to go back. That's amazing. Um, it must be a great feeling to know that impact of the kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I find it fulfilling. Yeah, praise the Lord. Again, the introductory courses we have students who are just some of them are studying maybe an MA in music or Christian education. Counseling is just kind of a requirement for them. Some of them are not interested, but in that case, my goal is very much to help them understand the value of the scripture, to see that the scripture is like a jewel. It's like a jewel. The more you turn it, the more beauty you see from various angles. So, I'm not going to teach them an intro to Testament 1 or 2, the whole scripture. They're not going to understand the whole thing. But the goal is kind of maybe to kindle a fire, to kind of see something about the importance of the scripture. So I think that's the goal with the students at the more beginner level.
You mentioned the wisdom books. You're talking, I assume, when you're talking about Ecclesiastics, Proverbs. Is that what you mean? Is
Yeah.
Psalms included in
I'm
that,
talking
or
about, yeah, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, some of the Psalms, and also the Book of Job. So yeah, the Book of Job is also, and I would
really?
include even the Book of Song of Songs. I would include Song of Songs too because one of the most important thing is to know how to love, right? If you cannot be very wise if you don't know how to love your spouse, but also to love God, of course. So I would include the Song of Songs in the wisdom literature, but
Interesting. And then obviously the Book of Job is a very interesting book. I know you and I had spoken on it a little bit. Is there any nugget of wisdom you can leave with us from that book specifically? A thought?
I'm teaching that course right now, so I'll give you a couple of ones. So first of all, I recommend that memorizing Job 13:15, or said, where he says, Job says, though he slays me, I will trust in him. So I think maybe to take this determination from Job, that though he slays me, I will trust in him. And maybe the second one, I would say, just be very aware that your feelings do not reflect the reality very many times, especially when through suffering. One of the biggest mistakes that Job makes is that he thinks that God is his enemy. So many times, if you look in the book of Job, he repeats, you make me your target. Your arrows, have gone through me. You consider me your enemy. Now that's how Job feels. Now, what's very clear from the very beginning of the book is that yes, God allows Satan to try him, but there's no way that God is Job's enemy. In fact, God is his friend. God is the one who's bragging about Job. But Job, through this difficulty that he goes, he has this misconceptions about God, which I think happens a lot to us when we're suffering. When we suffer, especially when we suffer very badly, we might think that God is against us. But that's where Job is extremely wrong. But you can see why he doesn't understand. He doesn't know what happened in heaven. He hasn't read the first two chapters. He never knows actually until the end. But when you go through difficulties, you might have wrong perceptions about God, even though God is on your side, especially if you're a believer. So I think that's also, one important thing to realize. And of course, perhaps the most important, the third one, let me say the third one is, of course, that Job, just like Ecclesiastes, shows us the limits of wisdom. So this is a key chapter in the book of Job, chapter 28, where it says, where can wisdom be found? And the conclusion is that wisdom was with God. Human beings do not understand certain things. Human beings have limits of wisdom. They cannot explain suffering, because that's what these people are trying to do. They're trying to see which can explain better the suffering of Job, and we all fail about that, because there are limits to human wisdom. Wisdom belongs to God, but of course, what we should do, we should turn from evil, right? We should turn from evil and we should fear God. That's so. Of course, in the book of Proverbs, the call to the fear God is at the beginning and at the end. In Ecclesiastes, especially at the end, but in the book of Job is most prominently in the middle. Job 28 is a key passage for understanding the book. It's a poem of wisdom. Where shall wisdom be found? So these are some three things. Maybe they
So
might be helpful with the book of Job.
at the beginning, you mentioned that Job was not aware of the fact that God was around him or watching him in the midst
Right.
of what circumstances he was going through. But I remember, at what point does God say, I know there's a verse in Job, I believe, right, where he says, have you seen my servant Job?
Yeah.
Is that in the Job?
Yeah, that's at the very beginning. Yeah. Yeah. So the narrator is saying that there was no one like Job, which was Tom Yashar. He was blameless and upright, who turned from evil and fear God. That's the definition of a sage in the book of Proverbs. So you have to understand the book of Job has to be read also like a contest of wisdom. Who can explain better suffering? So the language of wisdom is there, very, very prevalent. It's very, very common, because at one point, Job says, "Amnam ki atem am." He says something like this: "Indeed, you are the people, and with you wisdom will die." So there's a lot of sarcasm. So Job is saying, "Oh, you guys have all the explanation. If you die, the whole wisdom is gonna die, right?" So there's a contest of wisdom, and Job is presented as a sage because somebody who turns from evil and fears God is described as a wise person in the book of Proverbs. He's a wise person. But, in the beginning, it's not just the narrator that says that. It's also God himself who says to Satan, have you seen my servant Job? There's no one like him. So it's not just the narrator, of course, which is also inspired by the Holy Spirit, but God himself says that there's no one like him. So actually, God is not Job's enemy. God is allowing Satan to do something. Basically, what God does, he's allowing Satan to remove that hedge. He removes that hedge around Job. And then Satan is allowed to tempt him and to put him to trials. But there's no way that God is against him or he's his enemies or, he's trying to terrorize him or anything like that.
Well, Job was probably in major turmoil, and he thought maybe God had left him. God is saying to Satan, almost like bragging about his servant, that, have you seen my servant Job? I don't know. That kind of relates to maybe our life sometimes. My thought was that maybe we're struggling and we feel like, in our struggles, God is not there, but God is there. I don't know. It's just another reminder for me that not only there, but maybe he's very much there, and maybe proud of the fact that you are dealing with some of these struggles. And I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. They said, "Have you seen my servant?" Was like bragging about him, although he was going through tough circumstances. So I thought that you brought that up. That was interesting. That it was at the beginning. Job didn't even realize that God was watching all along.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. It's a great story, and there's a lot of great teaching there. In fact, you can also look at the Job, also kind of like from a pastoral point of view, as strategies of comfort in the book of Job. So that's also kind of interesting to look at the book from that point of view, because just to give you a quick example, in the beginning, Job has this stoic kind of position, right? He's going through suffering, and he says the famous verse, God has given, God has taken, may the name of God be blessed. And this is what happens many times when people go through trials. Like you have somebody who, let's say you're somebody's father or wife dies, and you see this person is very strong at the cemetery. He doesn't cry. Maybe, of course, he took some medicine, but maybe even if he didn't, you go and you want to comfort him, and he's very strong. And this is how Job is at the beginning in the first two chapters. So this is the stoic Job. But then, this person who was at the funeral, whose husband died, who's very strong there at the cemetery in the front of the coffin, goes home and is going to home for a second, for maybe a few days, and now she's by herself. And this person was very strong there at the funeral, is going to start crying and is going to start lamenting, and that's exactly what Job does. So there's a strategy, the strategies of dealing with these problems, strategies of comfort in the book of Job. One is like to be strong, to be stoic. Hey, God is given, God is taken, may his name be blessed. But after a while, that may break down. And that's what happens with Job. In Job chapter 3, he's a lament. Oh, I wish I was never born, kind of. And that happens to us too. You go home, you're by yourself, you start crying, you're lamenting, and it's very normal. And then you also have some strategies of comfort with the friends. The friends have the good strategies in the beginning. They come there and they just sit with him in the dust, and they cry, and they don't say anything. They're silent. So you have some strategies of comfort from them. Some of them are good, like in the beginning, but then they're going to be bad. But and you can go through the whole book and see some strategies of comfort. How is God trying to comfort him, right? So that's also how is his wife trying to comfort him, right? So that's interesting. The book can be read from by looking at some of the strategies of comfort, and many of them apply to our lives. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But that's also another way to look at the book of Job from a poimenics, the art of shepherding people. And the book can be used from that point of view. And if you talk to counselors, now Christian counselors, they actually use the book of Job for counseling. And it's a very great book, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we could probably have a whole entire discussion just on the book of Job. Was there a time when students came up to you and kind of had this aha moment of maybe understanding something that they didn't understand before from a biblical standpoint?
I have to actually look at some of my evaluations, but I remember reading an evaluation this summer. Actually, I have to look at that, and I was actually surprised. I was very encouraged by some of the evaluations. So there's one especially I remember. I don't remember the text, but I thought that person really had quite a few aha moments in my introductory Old Testament. And that particular evaluation, that's a recent one that really stuck to my mind. But yeah, I mean, I think that happens quite a lot, actually. Yeah, Bible is amazing. Sometimes not because of me, maybe sometimes because they read and they prepare for the class, and it's like, oh, I've never seen that, you know. But that's fine with me. It doesn't have to come from me. If it comes from the scripture or from some textbook I assign, it's fine with me.
Because I think you have a very interesting job where, yeah, it's not like you're teaching a course and it's like, physics or math and you kind of just take it and that's it. You go home and you check it off that I had to take that course. You're teaching the Word of God, which I assume has supernatural power. And so these guys that are taking your classes, that they're essentially diving deeper into the Word of God. That, if we believe the Word of God is life changing, then I can't imagine people walking away, just like taking a math course. So,
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah, by God's grace, I think there are many aha moments. Some of them I hear about, some of them I don't. Some of them I might read on evaluations. Some of them may be in heaven, but I think yeah, God works in mysterious ways and in powerful ways many times through His Word. Praise be to Him.
yeah, yeah. What's the plan for the future? If I don't know if you have something you wanted to share, or what's a goal that maybe you still want to achieve?
So the plan for the future, I'm working on a couple of books, so please keep me in your prayers, especially one right now. I mean, a couple, but one is on the Book of Psalms actually. So this book, by God's will, if it goes well, would actually one of the goals is to make Christians realize the importance of the Book of Psalms. So please pray for that. So I'm really happy about this book, and I'm working on that. I'm working on a presentation. And please also pray for me. I'll be preaching in chapel next month on the book of Haggai. So probably most of us have never heard the sermon on Haggai, or maybe you can remember. So pray for that, and yeah, please pray for my trip in December. In December, I'm going back in Asia. I'll be teaching a course. So, this school, I really love the students, very dedicated. So please pray for that. And, maybe I'll talk to you if you want to put a link down there. If somebody wants to support the ministry, I think that would be great. So I'll give you some more information.
Please. Yeah.
But if you can, support the ministry, because I'm still traveling, at least 2 this year, actually. I'm teaching 3 courses. I'm only traveling twice because once I had to teach through Zoom because of difficult situation on the ground. I was advised not to go. But yeah, I would appreciate any support for the ministry. It's yeah.
Send us whatever relevant links you have. Send it. We'll put it in the description here below.
Right.
Also, wanted to ask you: have you published other books before this, and are they up for sale somewhere?
Yeah, but I have a book published a long time. I was editing it with Mari Boda and the Trumper Longman. It's called The Words of the Wise Are Like Goats. It's a book on Ecclesiastes. So that's a book. It's co-edited with 2 other people. I mean, I came up with the idea, and my name appears last because it's in alphabetical order. My name is there's a B, a L, and I'm an R, so I'm the last one. But I come up with the idea, but doesn't matter. I think it's a very good book about Ecclesiastes. It has some very good articles. Some of them are more technical.
Mm-hmm.
And, I did write Hebrew grammar, but I don't think most people would be that interested in getting that. By the way, if you want that, I can send it to you. It's a PDF. I can send it to you for free. Maybe we can, share it. But yeah, not, and I've done a couple of books. I edited books of sermons. They're in Romanian. Actually, those are still available, I think, in Arad at Multimedia. So it's a book with sermons in honor of Pete Popovich, and one is for Mihai Sirbo. So there's a couple of books I edited. And I also have a couple of one sermon in each of these books. But I would say these are the main publications, besides a bunch of articles. Yeah.
If it's something that we can share with the audience, if people want to get a hold of the book, or please share those links with us, and we'll be happy to put them in the description. As well, if people want to maybe get a hold of you because they may have a question, or maybe they might have a question from the Old Testament that they're struggling
Yeah.
with, would you maybe you can provide us an email or some kind of contact information, and we can put in the description below.
Yeah.
Lastly, I have a question that I usually ask everybody, and I wanted to see what your input is on that. If, as somebody that has sort of kept this in mind, kind of making your life count by investing in God and people, and especially people, I mean, there's no bigger calling than to be a professor and investing in all these young people. What advice would you have for maybe young people starting out, that do want to make their life count for eternity? What advice would you have for them or input?
Again, I would just go back to my book of Psalms. Take the book of Psalms, pray it, sing it, memorize it. I think if you do that, you will know more about God. It will make you love God more, and it would also, send you into missions, because the book of Psalms is also a missional book, and the whole Scripture is a missional book. So I say, take the book of Psalms seriously, sing it, memorize it, and learn your theology from that. I think that would be a good start.
That's definitely very unique. So
I'm talking to you too, Dan.
that's right. That's right. I'll never look at the Psalms the same, and yeah, especially the Psalms you mentioned. I'll have to look at those specifically. Which my dad made me memorize the Psalms when I was younger. He would give me actually, he didn't give me nothing. He would send me on vacation to my grandma's, and by the time he would come to visit, I had a certain amount of Psalms I had to memorize and repeat to him.
You should give your dad a hug, or two, for that.
By the way, there's this ministry that's I actually want to get the gentleman on the podcast, because it's called Talanta Negots. It's a Romanian ministry, and what they do is they encourage young and old to memorize Scripture. And there's contests that they organize throughout the country to encourage people to memorize Scripture. And I thought that's a great ministry, because it's something that should be happening a lot more. Before we sort of wrap this up, I want to thank you for your time. Please say hello to Ika. But I wanted to do an exercise with you that I've just started recently doing. It's called Perspectives, where I basically present you a subject, and in 2-3 seconds, what first thing that comes to mind, just mention what comes to mind. And it's a way to get perspectives about this topic from different people. So whenever you're ready, I'm going to start, and I'll just present. And just first, here we go.
Okay. Politics. They're overrated. Spend more time in prayer, and be a strong Christian in the place where you are. Vote, but don't put your hope in politics.
All right, thank you.
Economy. Well, the economy, what can I say? I think it's going well, and I think it's important. I pray that our economists are doing well and making good moves. I don't know much about economy, unfortunately. Look at my bank account.
All right,
Yeah.
how about this?
Wealth. Wealth is a great danger. I can say, wealth is something that, be aware about wealth, because it might make you proud. It's very dangerous. It's not neutral. At the same time, of course, the wealth can be used for God's glory, and I encourage you to do that if you are wealthy, and for the kingdom.
Thank you.
Truth. Well, Jesus is the truth. That's all I want to say.
Amen. All right.
Love truth. Love Jesus. Eternity. Well, that's all I want to say. We only have one life. Let's live it for Christ, because only what's done for Christ will last in eternity. 1 Corinthians 15, the last verse. What you do for Christ is not in vain. It will last through eternity.
Amen.
Dating. Yeah. All I can say about dating is this. I'm dated in 1968. That's when I was born.
That's a new one. I don't think anybody said that one.
I'm outdated, okay? I'm outdated. Love. Love is the answer. I don't know. What I want to say about love, study the Song of Songs, but don't study it only as the love between a man and a woman. Study it as also describing the love between Christ and the church and the believer and God. So I think it's very important to study the book of Song of Songs, not just for human love, but also for the love of God, because most of us say that we love Christ, we love God, but we don't know what we say. I think the book of Songs may help you a lot in this direction.
Very good point.
Marriage. Marriage, what can I say about marriage? I thank God for my marriage and for my wife. And I pray for all of you guys that you will have a godly marriage in which you love your wife just like Christ loved the church.
Awesome. Okay.
Purpose. Well, I'm studying the book of Haggai right now, and the main purpose that we have to have is, of course, the pleasures of God and the glory of God. If you look at Haggai chapter 1, verse 8, the reason he's encouraging the people to rebuild the temple is because it's the pleasure of God and it's for the glory of God. And our purpose should be mainly to glorify God, like the Westminster Confession of Faith says. Church. Well, find a good church and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Encourage your pastors and, just enjoy the church, because if you say you love Christ, you should also love his body, which is the church. Family. Family is great. Love your family, love your parents, and, love your parents, of course, your children, your wife, but don't forget your parents when they're getting older. Be thankful to God for them, and, try to spend as much time with them as you can, because, my father just passed away a few years ago. So as you can imagine, I miss him. And it's very important to spend time with your parents as long as they're still alive. Jesus. I hope you love Jesus more every day, and please pray for me that I truly love Jesus. We say that we love Jesus, but many times it's just with our lips. I wish that I would love Jesus more, and I pray that you will love Jesus more.
Amen. And I realized as you were mentioning some of these that, you mentioned your father under the family. And this whole story started with your father technically, risking sort of his future, his life potentially to come here. And then because of that, there's a doctor, Cristian Rata, which I realized I didn't mention that you actually have a doctorate. You're a Dr. Rata. I know you as Cristi because we've been friends for a long time, but to many you're Dr. Rata. And anyway, it's something that's we should all reflect on, because our parents, we stood on the shoulders of parents or giants, and we were able to do many things that many couldn't dream of doing under the communists. So.
Yeah, it's truly a miracle. No, that's a great point, Dan. It's truly a miracle that I'm here. And it's a miracle because my father never finished high school. My mother never finished high school, not because they were not smart, they just didn't have the opportunity. But by God's grace, all three of their children actually have a doctorate. I mean, not to brag about it, but it's just something, again, it shows the grace of God. And it's kind of a little bit of a miracle, let's face it. Considering that none of our parents finished high school. It is the work of God, we could say, yeah.
So I bring this up because there seems to be this sort of narrative throughout a bunch of the podcasts I've recorded with different successful people, and the parents keep coming up, the sacrifices that our parents made. So that's why I brought it up, because it seems to be a common thing, and we want to thank them for that. And like I said, we want to potentially in the future create a podcast highlighting some of their sacrifices that they did for us. So anyway, without any further ado, I do want to thank you, Dr. Rata, my friend Chris, for taking your time and spending it with us and inspiring people. I hope this story does inspire people. I hope there'll become some great professors out of this, some great Bible teachers, and some people that just love God and will absolutely read the Psalms and the book of Job. Thank you for your time. Thank you for...
Thank you, Master Daniel. Great to see you, and may God bless you. Let's keep in touch.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rata. For those of you that have joined us once again, thank you so much for following along. I hope this has been a very inspiring story. Don't forget to make your life count. See you next time. God bless.